Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to end this chapter on the issue of race and racism institutionally. Okay, so we have to remember this. In current politics, the debate over whether or not racism is institutional is something that Americans have a debate about, right? So in the Black Lives Matter, there is an argument that blacks are disproportionately killed by police officers, as if there's something systemic to the institution. Now, remember, again, I'm not going to get in the middle of this debate right now. I'm pointing out that there's this argument there. And then you have others who are saying that they criticize the police's disproportionate use of force, according to their argument, but they don't necessarily think that it's race related. It might be something else. And then there are those who say that police are being unfairly targeted by people who are committing crimes, and that police have to make their best judgment at the time, and these lead to unfortunate consequences. So these are the kind of debates that we see taking place now. But what we can really say, though, for sure, while Americans are debating about where institutional racism starts, or stops, or ends in current American political life, you don't have anything that's overtly race related in terms of saying that you know uh, blacks are in a place of discrimination, and we have now our first black president. Whether you like him as a president or not, he did make history in that regards, right? Now, the law clearly was still race-based, especially in the South, because if we remember, after Reconstruction, ending slavery didn't end the slaveholding society basically kept white supremacy intact in the South officially, and there were many racist policies in places like Oregon, and they had black laws, and so you had, it wasn't just the South. And then in unions, some unions didn't let black members in. Okay, just in the same way that women were also, the place for women and blacks was being debated, and it wasn't a given that all women had the same rights as men, and it wasn't a given that blacks had the same rights as whites. Okay, and so there was a decision, if you remember, in Plaguey versus Ferguson, that you could be separate but equal. Okay, that it wasn't discriminatory if you put all blacks into one school and all whites another, and you separated them, and you have segregation taking place. Okay, now we saw a picture here, which we'll go into, and we learned about two important men, Booker T. Washington and Du Bois. Keep in mind, the French last name would have been Dubois, but he pronounced it Du Bois, and that was that's the proper pronunciation for him. Okay, is Du Bois. Now, there was a school to help black men learn how to work hard and get skills. There's that saying, feed a man a fish, and you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, and you feed him for the rest of his life. This idea that hard work can help them be productive in society. And Booker T. Washington basically accepted that blacks could be, or outwardly, he's basically said that blacks could function in a segregated society, and that he wanted them to advance themselves on their own, not necessarily looking for government help. And you had W.E.B. Du Bois accused Washington of sending blacks down the path that ensured permanent enslavement to white America. In other words, Du Bois felt like he wanted to just straight up address the fact that the way that white America was functioning with black America was just flat out wrong. I mean, Booker T. Washington was even claiming to audiences in Europe, that there wasn't racism against blacks in the way, basically um, saying that things were relatively fine. And Du Bois went actually on a counter lecture tour to combat what he thought was the false propaganda of Booker T. Washington. Um, he was viewed as a sellout, and others thought that he was simply doing the best he could, working within the system to help his people, and he was more pragmatic and less antagonistic. But keep in mind, just as workers had different camps fighting for them, and they didn't all agree, all workers seemed to have wanted more rights. Did they all want to be socialists or anarchists or communists? No. The issue of Black America's approach and their leadership approach to how to address racism also had this variance. And both men were intellectual in their own right and very productive, but they're two different visions, and they're kind of combating each other. Excuse me, definitely was a kind of a conflict of the time. In a certain way, you could kind of say, when it came to segregation later, we'll see with Martin Luther King Jr. and dealing with other more radical Black nationalists such as Malcolm X, in the Nation of Islam. There's always been different kind of ideas on how to address this problem. Okay, and so you'll read in the textbook more about some of the stuff coming from Du Bois. Was there anything else I wanted to say on that? Well, I guess actually before I finish up here, just so keep in mind, you have Ben Carson, right? He is a Republican running for president, and he said that Obamacare is the worst thing that's happened to America since slavery. That upset a lot of Black Americans, but there's a big debate now about where the role of let's say a Black Republican fits in modern politics. And again, I'm just kind of pointing out that all groups have various voices and different persuasions. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about this for now. But again, I want you to kind of explore and read in the text on the differences of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm having you write in your assignment a little bit more about their differences. Okay, now, so basically, as we end this chapter, right, we dealt with social problems from the middle class progressives at the beginning of the 20th century, their different solutions, the socialists versus laissez-faire industrial capitalists, and the role that journalism helped to play in exposing certain conditions, and ultimately, I think as we saw with everything happening, that, as I pointed out, all branches of society was figuring out or trying to take their own approach how to deal with the turmoil that was taking place. So whether you were a Black American, a woman, working class, an industrialist, or a politician, everybody was fighting to create a different type of world order. And again, we're pretty much back to this spot, it seems like, in modern day politics. And unfortunately, there's no laws in the universe that ever say that we'll ever fully resolve all these questions, is there? But humans will always try their best or their worst. That's all I have to say about this section and this chapter.